Up and running. We have a lot of new people. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Okay, it looks like YouTube's running too. Sweet. Yeah, for those of you that are kind of new, there's no real topic. We just kind of riff. So if you want to bring up anything or have any questions, I guess now's your time to ask. I do this twice a month, every 2 weeks usually. So before we do that, let me just go get my glasses. One sec. All right, yo, yo, yo. How many people do we have? How many people do we have? Why do I look so weird? One sec. We have a lot of new people. Maybe somebody new introduce yourself. We gotta break the ice. FJ, introduce yourself.
Me.
Yeah.
I'm a fifth year CS BBA Comp Science student graduating in August 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking to kind of work on some projects, grind, get my knowledge up. Yeah, looking for probably 2026 roles because a lot of the 2025 roles closed in September, but I was on an internship in September, so I
Yeah.
wasn't really focused on applying. So yeah, that's my little introduction.
And you want to go into quant?
Quant or big tech, but probably Quant would be preferable. I have a few friends in New York right now.
Awesome. Cool. Is what kind of draws you to quant?
Um, well, yeah, mostly it's just because I already have friends in the industry, and when I went out there, had a really good time. And I think it's pretty interesting with high frequency trading, um, kind of learning about the stock market as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You're breaking up. I can't hear you.
I just went to throw something out for a second.
Oh. Does
I was
anybody?
just in the middle of eating lunch.
Oh, good. Does anybody have any questions? I usually like to start with questions. Nobody got any questions?
I've got a question.
Yeah, sure.
So in the Discord, I noticed that you've moved to Hong Kong, is that right?
I'm moving to Hong Kong.
And moving, gotcha.
Yeah.
And that you're considering dropping your green card for tax reasons.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm trying to get into quant, and I think my goal is to try get to the United States. Currently, I'm in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is that something you recommend for people in quant, or going for somewhere where with cheaper taxes?
I'll give you my green card. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't work that way. So if you're already
I
in
wish.
Europe, if you're already in Europe, essentially like going to the U.S. is probably going to be a lower tax jurisdiction. So it's a step up for you. But going from a medium tax jurisdiction to a lower tax jurisdiction and having a green card, you really kick yourself in the head because you're like, well, why am I paying Uncle Sam like an additional 22% and have capital gains tax and have whatever and have all these other taxes when I can just be in a super low tax environment? So to me, it doesn't make sense. And I think I'm at a point in my career where I can, like, anywhere I want to work, I can effectively through whatever visa process that the country provides. So I don't need to rely on having the U.S. as my home base. At the same time, I don't need to make this decision now. So when the tax season comes in 2025, whenever, December, when I'm filing my taxes for Hong Kong, I can then consider, do I want to also apply for, or, do my American taxes? And if the answer is no, then I can submit I plan to abandon my green card and I'm not going to be a U.S. tax person. But I don't want to get to a point where it's been 8 years, I'm still in Hong Kong, and I'm still paying American taxes, and I add up all my taxes, and it comes out to like what? I don't know, like $300,000 I paid over 8 years that I've gotten nothing out of it for. You know what I mean? It's kind of easier for me
Yeah,
too.
gotcha.
It's easier for me too because I already see Social Security as like a money pit, anyways. So like I know I'm probably never gonna get that back. So there's no real point of like caring about. It's a sunk cost to me. I don't even consider it in my calculation.
Would you ever want to go back to the US, or
I'm
you're going where the money is, or you tired of it?
um there's no doubt that there's a lot of jobs in the U.S. The thing is, I think like I've gotten a very well paying position in a low tax jurisdiction that's also low cost of living. That's also really like close to what's I think going to be the center of the universe in the future, which is Asia. So it's like the best of both worlds for me. I'm kind of tired of Chicago and New York to be honest. Things are kind of going downhill in terms of like, well, first of all, the weather there is not so great. I have hobbies outside of work like riding a motorcycle. I want to be able to ride all year round, and I can't do that in Chicago. Like 5 months of the year, it's done, right? So um, being in Hong Kong is going to be a lot better. Somebody asked, what about Florida or Texas? Yeah, maybe Miami, but Miami is essentially a citadel stronghold in the sense that they're the only ones with a major presence there. Nobody else there has a strong presence, or nobody else there that can pay a salary that's competitive to what I'd be expecting for my tenor and skill. Um, so yeah, it's it'll be a tough sell to say come back to the U.S. It's not
Makes
all,
sense.
yeah. It's not all about me though, guys. I noticed there's a bunch of people here, so if anybody has any questions or whatnot, feel free to ask. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I do
Yeah, I'd
have a
love.
question.
What's
Go
up?
ahead.
Thanks. So I'm new here, so I don't know if you've covered this before, but I was scrolling through the internet and looking for preparation guides for quant trading and quant research, and I had found these two companies. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name, but they're essentially boot camps that have like a 500 question bank, and you pay, I don't know, like a couple $1,000s, and they say that all those questions they have are one-to-one pulled from the interviews, and people are getting offers by taking those. I want to see if you've like maybe heard of them or know any insider details.
Yeah, I know about them. I've actually reached out to them to see, like, hey, can you guys give me some access to what your content looks like? Maybe there might be like a partnership opportunity here. Because if, essentially, if I look at their content and I'm like, this is actually really good, it can really help my subscribers, then I can mention, hey guys, by the way, there's this resource you can look into. Because I know what you're asking, and a lot of people have asked me, is it legit? Well, I don't know. I reached out to them. I asked, can I take a look at what you guys are selling? And I just never heard back. So I can't tell you how legit it is. What I can tell you is that paying for something should probably be the last resource, especially when it's that expensive. At that point, it's like you're kind of going back to school in a sense. And to me, going to school is kind of the last thing somebody should do. What they should exhaust is self study. Because all this information's online effectively. There's cheaper alternatives out there as well. There's like the equivalent of the lead code of Quant. There's two other websites out there. I'm not going to name them explicitly, but there's two other websites out there that have a bank of questions. Um, there is also a lot of books out there, books that I've recommended people read, books that they can pick up. There's a lot of discussion on forums as well, the type of questions that people get. So I would say like spending $5,000 is probably the last thing you should probably do. And what you should first do is go through the resources, self-study, go through the books, go through the interview-like questions, the two websites that I can mention a little later after this call if you don't know what I'm referring to. And then there is always the certain strategy you want to employ when you're interviewing. So effectively, what you want to do is you want to first interview companies outside the industry that you don't, or industry adjacent that you might not even want to work at, just for practice. Maybe interview in countries, firms that exist in countries you don't want to work in, just so you can gain practice and see kind of where you're at. So maybe if you don't want to work in Singapore, but there's this firm that's only in Singapore, give them a go and apply there and see how it goes. And then you can see, okay, where's my technical bar at? It's like a pole jumper at the Olympics. They start low and they go higher and higher and higher and higher and higher until they pass that bar. And once they hit the bar, they're like, okay, this is the highest I can go. So if the highest you can go is a quote unquote B tier firm, whatever you qualify a B tier firm is at, then that's what you go for. And then maybe you level up in a year or two, and then you apply to maybe that your dream or your A tier firm, right? That's the strategy that I would go through.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you, I'm just curious, like following up on that, if you get an offer from one of these lower tier firms that you're not really interested in, do you take it and then just renege it before you full-time start? Or what type of strategy do you use? You just never get to that stage, you just tell them you're not interested?
It depends on, essentially, it depends on what you want to do. Like if you really want to leave your current place of work, for example, for whatever reason, then you take it, but you might still continue interviewing. But if you
Yeah.
really, if you really don't, like if they offer you a salary that's lower and hours that are more grueling and it's just every metric is worse, then I would just reject it flat. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, you can also use it in negotiation process, right? So I have this other company that's very interested in me. They've given me this offer. Now, the thing is, you need to be very skilled about that. There's a lot of firms in the US that you can get away with, like, effectively, I don't condone this, but effectively lying and saying I have another offer. I mean, I've heard people that have said that. I've never done that myself. I've heard people that have said that. But if you do that in, like, Asia, they're going to ask for proof. So there's people that are very eager to kind of like upsell themselves in that regard. Definitely don't do that if you're applying in Asia. Don't do it at all, in my opinion, but especially not if you're in Asia, because they will ask for proof and to check. If they don't play around with that stuff.
Yeah.
Almost everybody here is new,
Respect.
except for Bulbasaur. Yeah, what's up, Sebo?
Oh no, I was just saying that I respect that culture. High integrity.
Yeah, it's a high integrity and high trust as well. Right.
I had a question too.
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason you went with Hong Kong over Singapore?
So I interviewed in Singapore. I didn't actually get an offer in Singapore. I got an offer in Chicago and an offer in Hong Kong. Singapore is cool. I've never been there. I like its degree of economic freedom, but I heard that it's kind of boring. I don't know how true that is. That's what I've heard. And
Yeah.
it seems like it's a bit expensive. At least I looked at the cost of motorcycles there relative to in the US and Hong Kong, and it just seemed like it was almost double or more as expensive. So that kind of irked me a little.
There's also the work-life balance. I heard it's like really, really bad in Singapore. Like
Yeah.
everyone's just trying to dip versus
The-
Hong Kong.
That's actually true.
Right.
One place that I interviewed at, they're like, "How do you feel about working on the weekends?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, we might ask you to work Saturday, but if you work Saturday, you get Monday off." But like to me, it's just like, you know, I'm a grinder, and this is the age where I believe in grinding. Like maybe if you're 50 and you have a wife and kids and a dog at home, maybe you don't grind that hard. But like, I don't know, being like just randomly getting a call Friday night and saying, "By the way, like I want you here tomorrow as well." To me, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, you said that Asia might be the central in the future, right?
Yeah.
Like, what did you guys exactly
Oh,
mean
for
by
sure.
that?
I think like economically, they are a lot more free. So at least Hong Kong and Singapore. So if you look at their economic metrics and their indices, they have rank a lot higher on economic freedom. I also think that, I don't want to make this too much of a political discussion, but like there's a lot of like economic uncertainty in countries like the U.S. There's a lot of there's cultural issues, cultural wars. There's rising crime. Let me put it this way: I want to live comfortably wherever I go. So if I'm going to go to New York, something I need to put up with is a commute, and in the commute there's also a lot of being uncomfortable during the commute. You have people panhandling. You have people. You had a story last week, I think it was, where a guy set a woman on fire in the subway. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to have to think about that.
Yeah.
Right? Like in Hong Kong, it's clean, it's tidy, it's high trust. You trip, somebody helps you up, right? Everybody's kind to you. Like it's clean. There's people you don't have to fear being pushed in front of the subway. Every time I'm in New York, I always stand back. I always stand with like my back against the wall, just so some guy that's might be a little nuts is not going to come and try to throw me in front of the train, right? I don't even need to think about that in Hong Kong, right? So it's just it's a lot of comfort there. Also, like If I want to go on vacation when I'm in Chicago, where can I go? Okay, I can jump to Mexico, fine, but like just the amount of options in Hong Kong, it's just incredible. I can go into mainland, I can go to Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Taiwan, Japan. There's just a bunch of options.
True.
Wouldn't the high work cult, wouldn't the high trust, doesn't usually high trust like correlate with like higher work culture?
Yeah, it depends on the organization as well because Hong Kong's an international city, right? So you have companies in Hong Kong that have a satellite office there, but they might be based in Amsterdam or based in Paris or based in New York, right? So while the location is Asia, the company culture is largely based off what my experience. It's largely crafted by like where the headquarters are and who the people running it
I
are,
see.
right? Because at the end of the day, culture is who works at the firm. The office is just like a piece of concrete.
Mm.
What would you say about working in Amsterdam?
Probably not, at least for me.
Oh, what are the reasons?
Um, I think there's like a good amount of anti-Semitism there, and I'm Jewish, so that's a
Oh yeah.
turnoff for me from that standpoint. From another standpoint too, like taxes and the effectively like the pace of life. Like I want to have a nice motorcycle, drive nice cars, and like everybody's on a bicycle there. There's no like massive like skyscrapers in Amsterdam. Like I want to be in like a city. I want that proper fast city life. I don't want the kind of like, and I get it that people have different lifestyles, and some people like the slowness, some people don't like the slowness, but I'm just a lot more in tune with the Asian culture than the European culture, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like I've been learning Mandarin since university, probably even less, right? So, and I've
What
lived
got
in
you to
China.
learn?
What's up?
What got you to learning Mandarin?
For me, it was a lot about like, I thought I wanted to be a business, do something in business, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to differentiate myself. So, what can I do to kind of unlock another market and help myself stand out in front of other people? Right? So effectively, I'm in front of employers. So effectively, I'm like, oh well, there's this massive market. I kind of also like anime and like the Asian culture as well, the gaming culture. Why don't I just like learn another language? And in another 5 years, I'll probably be really good at it. So that's when I started. I started once a week, and continued from there, and it's just worked out really well for me. I also like I also
Interesting.
like the culture and the education and the food. Like you have to like a lot of different parts of the what surrounds the language as well, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Would you say it's easier to get a job in the Asian market versus like America for like Quant?
I would say it is, yeah. That's what I was actually surprised about. Like, while there weren't many firms hiring in the U.S., I felt like in Asia, like it was all systems lock, like full speed ahead. That's how I also feel like I was interviewed. It was like round, 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 round. You did 5 rounds. We're good. We like you. We're solid. We asked the right questions. We had you in front of the right people, and we're not like dragging our feet. But in the U.S., it feels like a lot of firms were dragging their feet, and they were just not comfortable with not knowing enough about you. So it's like you already had like five. You already had what is it like 7 interviews? Oh, we might want 2 more from you. It's like, well, what else are you gonna get from me in those another 2 rounds that you haven't already got? And if you haven't already got what you want in the past 8 rounds or 7 rounds, why not? Like, is it a me issue? Is it a process issue? If it's a process issue, that's also not a good sign. You know what I
It just
mean?
sounds like bureaucracy bloat all over again.
Yeah, it's bureaucracy bloat. And what does that say about the firm as well? Like if they can't make a clear cut decision after having you speak to everybody you need to, you know, it's like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I also feel like even the firms that were interviewing in the US, they were also firms that are in stagnation or even in murky terms, murky circumstances. So I'm not going to name any names, but like even the ones that were hiring, it seemed like they were on shaky ground based off what I've heard in the industry and based off what I've heard from people that work at the companies I was interviewing at.
Could it be just like we're all in pretty uncertain times, so that's why they also get impacted?
Yeah, and I think it's also just that like the markets were barely moving at the time, so they were just making less money because a lot of companies at least the ones I was interviewing at, were like market making firms. And as a market maker, you're not going to be making money if the market's not moving.
Mm,
Somebody asked, so why are people leaving India to the US? I think they're leaving for like tech roles, not necessarily quant roles.
yeah.
And India is another market. There might be competition there. Some people might be able to pass the bar in the US, but not pass the bar in India, just simply because the competition's a lot hotter and the supply's a lot lower.
Pretty much. Oh yeah, did you get a chance to see, do you know if Hong Kong is gonna have like a lot of drones? Like I heard in China they're just doing drone deliveries now. Like you can order bubble tea
With
and the drone will
drones?
deliver nearby.
No, I
Yeah,
haven't. I
you
haven't
seen the
heard of that.
videos? I'll just send it to you right now.
Okay.
It's pretty crazy. Uh, yeah, there's a bunch of other ones. You know, fine drone. So you might actually like get a chance to do it in Hong Kong,
I'll let you know if I do. I'll post in the Discord.
or IG.
Yeah, or IG. Yeah, a day in the life of a quant with a drone delivery to his window.
I feel like that's gonna like attract way too many people to the Asian market and just flood the applicants.
Yeah, probably.
Delivery.
Ooh, I can't order food. We have a bunch of people here. Anybody else? We have some new people. Oh, Smatrix. I recognize you. Do you have any questions?
Oh, how you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Yeah, bro. I've heard like you did like C# a bit in the past. Like, what was your experience with it? Is it a language worth learning? Because I'm
Worth.
using it currently for like game development, and I was wondering if it's a transferable skill for like the quant industry.
I would say it's definitely transferable. If I can do things again, I would rather learn Python than learn C sharp. But there's a lot of firms that do use C sharp. They usually use it for like back end and maybe some front end if they write their own front ends. So they use it for back end development for things that are not like mission critical. Just because it's a lot easier with the like what the ecosystem looks like and what the NuGet store looks like what's available in terms of packages and libraries that have already been written. So yeah, it's definitely up there as a language that's used. You go in a lot of job descriptions, you'll see like, oh, C++ and C sharp or something like that.
I'm just curious.
Sure.
Like aside from, sorry, you're saying Matrix?
No, just saying thank you. So
Yeah, no problem.
I see. I'm just curious. Aside from maybe ML and data scientists, like how come Python is so regularly used? Isn't one of its main issues that it's really slow with their GIL stuff?
Yeah, it's slow, but it's quick. So it's slow, but it's quick to iterate on and quick to build, and it just has so much integrations that it makes it like super easy to use. Because you can do a lot with a little bit of code. Like if I want to make an HTTP request, right? And I can do that with the request library that's already written for me. If I want to upload something to an S3 bucket on Amazon, I just need like to read it from a config file, a key and a user ID or whatnot, and I can just use whatever built-in API to upload or a document or fetch whatever document, and it's all really well documented as well. So, um, yeah.
Makes sense.
Is
Question.
it? Oh, you can go.
Serious. Any strategy for applying? Should you just go to the website, apply for a position, or what do you think about headhunters or trying to reach out to people on LinkedIn and get a referral, or just keep it simple?
I do one of two things, either through a recruiter or through a direct application. To me, referral seems like really dumb if you don't know the person working there. So if you're just effectively like saying, "Hey, I'm a dude, can you refer me?" That's not great. If you get the referral through like, "Hey, I'm really interested in your company. Can we sit for a coffee chat for 10 minutes and talk about it?" And then they speak to you and it's a really good conversation and you're vibing and you have a good feeling at the end, then ask like, "Hey, by the way, if I was to shoot my resume to this company, would I be able to mention your name or would you be able to refer me?" Right? You might want to ask that not on the spot. You might want to ask it in a text message after, just so they don't feel uncomfortable. in the same position, because nobody likes to tell another person no, right? So you might want to do it that way. But I always just go for direct application if I don't really know anybody at the firm. And the only reason I would go through a headhunter is if three things. I'd go through a headhunter for three different reasons. One, they are a headhunter in a market you're not familiar with, like I used one for Hong Kong. Two, if you feel like they can provide significant value because they worked closely with these firms and they can tell you like what you can expect roughly in each round. And three, if you think they're able to better manage relationships than you can with the various companies. When you go through a recruiter, effectively the recruiter makes money if you get hired, and the firm works with that recruitment company to find candidates. So you are in essence like a commodity that is being paid for by the company that's looking for you when you go through the recruiter. When you go through it alone, effectively you're kind of like coming to their doorstep. But when you go through the recruiter, it's like, oh, we have a new gift for you, like a new toy you can play with. And effectively, when they see that new gift, that new shiny object, they're like, oh, okay, well, this is just based off anecdotal experience, not anything scientific, but it feels like they respect your time more through the recruiter than through the cold application. Because when you go through the recruiter, it's like, oh, okay, I'm paying for this candidate's time because I'm paying for the recruiter's time and the recruiter found me the candidate. But when you go through the non-recruiter path, it's like, okay, some dude's here at my door. Like, it's like, oh, Jehovah's Witness. You're like, hey, what do you want? And then you have to make a really good sales pitch to get them to kind of like let you in and speak about your Lord and Savior, if that makes sense. It's a weird analogy.
How do you usually find these headhunters? Just like look on LinkedIn?
So the one that I actually went through for Hong Kong, he actually found me. He found me, and he reached out at like the right time. It was kind of like the planets aligned. But I used two headhunters. The one in the US that I used, she was actually through a friend that landed a place at Citadel that recommended me to her. At Zanker,
Yeah.
have you seen that video where some lead code dude rants about you for an hour on YouTube yet? Yeah. He spent 35 minutes talking about something he could have said in 5 minutes, and the entire comment section was against the dude. By that I mean they were on my side. It was a kind of a weird video. Anyway, sorry, coming back to the Discord.
Would you say that it's common to work extra hours when you're on a team that trades like a 24-hour asset like Bitcoin or ETH instead of like stocks?
No, because there's night shifts. So there's day shift, night shift. They switch out the traders, right? So every 8 hours, I think they switch out the traders. Some exchanges even have regulation where your trader sub ID needs to change. So when you submit an order, you attach a trader sub ID so they can correlate an order to a given trader that made that trade, so that they know that they have there's a name to a trade, a human name to a trade, and they have regulations where they say if we get the same trade ID from the same computer for over 12 hours, we're gonna fine you.
Wow, interesting.
So, yeah. So it's not like the trader can say, you know what, I'm gonna keep going, you have to stay here. He has to go anyways, so they might as well just get another shift going.
Hey, I was wondering, like, for leak code and algorithms and data structures, what programming language is best to use it? Because I see a lot of people recommending Python, but you mentioned that C++ is what everyone uses in your industry.
Yeah, I use the language that I want to be tested on. So I'm going to use C++, but there are other people that have different takes, like, oh, I write Python, but competitive programming, I think it's easier to use C++. I never really understood that sort of stuff. To me, it was more like, just use what you're comfortable with and what's my camera doing? Use what you're comfortable with and what you like, and go from there. Because to me, it doesn't make sense, unless you're doing this for awards and prizes, to learn a language just to code whatever, lead code problem, and then you never look at it ever again. To me, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, you had those like free like foundational books for CS, like computer architecture, networking, and OS. is there any like projects you recommend to learn that? Like I have the books, like I want to like build some projects on top of that just to, you know, get more experience and like pad out my GitHub profile.
So you want experience in terms of like operating system experience? Like what
Just
sort of
in
projects
general,
do you want?
like OS, networking, comp arc. Like, is there any projects you recommend just to like learn these things?
Yeah, I would say for networking and yeah, for networking, build a client server architecture project. So a distributed system where you're sending information back and forth between two computers. The information at first doesn't need to make sense. You don't need to have it as something that's like, oh, I'm gonna build some whatever game where I send the server an input and it gives me back an output. It can be whatever you want at the beginning. Obviously, it needs to kind of make sense because you need to make architectural decisions. Is it a bidirectional streaming protocol? Is it a request response? Is it a request stream? Right? So look into that and look into gRPC for that. There's a lot of tutorials on that. Google Protobuf it's called, or gRPC. For operating systems, so a lot of it's more theoretical. I can say like maybe build a task scheduling algorithm. That might be an interesting project. So there's a couple of different algorithms you can look at: round robin, first in, first out, shortest time to completion, those sorts of things. You can also then for concurrency, concurrency can be part of your networking project. Build your server multi-threaded. So there's a lot of different ideas out there to play around with.
Is there any for computer architectures that are just too theoretical and low level to have like a project for?
You can maybe build a game that works something along the lines of like your server is like a cache and it's an n-way associative cache, and then you go ahead and spam it with different like block frames or cache lines that have their own like physical tag that says what block frame they belong to, and then like see how many conflict misses and all that stuff there is. But that's capacity misses, etc. That's kind of a weird project. I would say stick to the theory for that. People are probably going to ask you for the theory. You can test the theory. So, for example, a question that people might get in a quant interview is something along the lines of like, how would you measure RAM latency? So the latency of your RAM. So, you write a program that does that. You write a program that measures latency for your L1 cache, your L2 cache, your L3 cache, your RAM, etc. There's actually a guy that gave a couple of examples of how he did that in one of my recent videos. I think it was called something along the lines of Quant aspiring student stuns everyone or something.
All right, cheers, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey CJ, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at the features that are offered with the different versions of C#, and particularly in C#, I think it was C# 9 and 10. Microsoft ended up adding additional empowered the record type. And the beauty of the record type is that it's an immutable. It's immutable, but it's a reference type, right? I'm just trying to see what the advantage is to that. I know it's immutable, but from a performance standpoint, how exactly would that? I guess more in a general programming concept wise, how is that enhanced performance? What makes better by having something like that?
So it overrides
I know.
I believe it overrides the get hash code inequality as well. There's also a record struct. So by virtue, record struct would be faster than a record class because the class is allocated on the heap and the struct's allocated on the stack. So
Right.
record struct will probably give you performance benefits over a standard class. There's probably some optimization there with like the equals and get hash code as well for equality that would be better than something that you'd probably manually implement.
Right.
I guess it's to me it's a bit more of like a syntactic sugar over a class. You don't have to define the constructor. It's kind of like a data class in Python. You don't need to define the constructor. You just need to define the member variables and their properties. and then you can pass whatever you
Right.
want into them.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. I noticed. I think they introduced the record strut in C sharp 11 or 12.
Yeah, it definitely came after the
Yeah.
record.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Cool. So because the strut, if since it's a strut, it would be a value type, thus on on the stack.
Yeah.
And there's big performance boost there. Okay, I've been trying to find ways to introduce it at work, but because we have a legacy code base, I have to spend a little bit more time figuring out, okay, which of our data objects or DTOs can we replace with just a record type, or even go as far as a record strut.
Yeah, it's kind of weird
But
because the way C# works is like you have different SDKs and different like .NET versions. There's like .NET 4.7.2, and after that they're like, well, we don't want to. There's different like APIs. Like there's the .NET Standard, .NET Framework. .NET Framework is like Windows specific. .NET Standard is like the APIs provided to the framework, and then like I think .NET Standard 2.1 is where they effectively said like this is a set of APIs that are operating system agnostic, so they're not Windows only. And then like .NET 5 is built on .NET Standard 2.1, but .NET 5 gives you access to everything in C# 9 and above, whereas .NET whereas .NET 4.7.2 is like 8 and below. It's weird. They have this weird system. But now that they are effectively everything's on like .NET 5 and above, effectively like you don't have to worry about that anymore. Unless you're migrating from an older code base, of course. But when you're starting a new project, you don't have to worry about it so much.
Right. Cool. And then one small question, and then I'll step off the podium. You know, you guys work with C. Obviously, you work with C++ a lot, and I'm just wondering what limitations would I run into if I'm using C# to build something the equivalent to like quant related. So I know some of the ideas or project ideas he thrown around was a order book. You also shared like a Black Scholes simulator. What from I guess at what point it's like you really can't use C# anymore. You have to use something more lower level. I know obviously a hardware is the if you're working with hardware, it's better to work in a lower level language. But why? What are other limitations of C#?
As effectively, like, if you don't care how things happen, you're fine with using C#. If you care about how things happen, why they happen, what should and should not happen, when, effectively, like, C++ is the way to go. And when I say what should and should not happen when, C# has a garbage collector. When it runs and what it compacts, and if it decides to include a stage 1 object or decides to classify this object as stage 1 or stage 2, if that doesn't matter to you, then C# is fine. But if you want more control, if you want more power and performance, you probably want to go with C++. You can also, I've never done anything like any like funny business like optimization, like core isolation or whatever with C#. To me, you just give away too much of that to the language writers and the people that have worked on the C# compiler. Right.
Okay. No, this was good. This gives me a pretty good idea. I guess it gives me, why would one choose a lower level language compared to using something higher level like C#? Another question popped in my head real quick. Would Rust be some?
I don't know.
Sorry, yeah, I'm taking up time. Sorry.
No, just you just mentioned that I'll give it to other people, and I don't want people to be like, oh, what's this dude doing? So I'm just gonna have other people join in.
Right. I understand. Yeah, go ahead. I'll step off the podium.
We have a record amount of people here. Anybody else? Rafiq, you didn't say anything for a while, or you didn't say anything at all. Do you have anything? By the way, guys in chat, after I'm done the Discord call, I'll answer members' questions. Sorry, go ahead.
Rafiki Pumbaa, is that what you're
Yeah,
you
that's
were
you.
asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, you might not.
Um,
I don't know.
I'm kind of I have some questions right now on I don't know questions, but I'm learning about the extended thread and
Sure.
multi-threading. Um, and I guess the like I'm kind of curious, how is dead thread implemented under the covers? Like, is there a system call or something that it interfaces with the scheduler on how it um, is that you could probably look at the stud thread source code and see how it's actually implemented on x86 processors. Is that the way you would kind of look into if you're curious on how that is actually implemented?
Yeah, yeah. That's effectively what I would do. There
Okay.
has to be
Do
some
you have
sort of
any
system
comments on
call.
how it's implemented?
There has to be some sort of system call to like spawn a child and have it run and pass a callback that it wants to execute. Um,
Okay.
I've never actually
Well, that's
taken
what
a
I'm.
I've never actually taken a look like below there. Like I've taken a look at the thread level and above and everything around it, but I've never looked below it. That's probably something I'm gonna write to do something like that. It's a good exercise.
Yeah, because that's what I'm kind of struggling with because I know with when you're creating a process, you do like a fork or a spawn, and then a thread. Is that something different, or is it basically doing is it calling making one of those system calls under the covers? Um, but anyway, just I'll probably look into it some more.
Yeah. I know that when I was reading about processes in the operating systems 3D pieces, there was like a fork call, exec call. There was a way to like connect the child process back. So
Mhm.
that's another child process though. Uh, thread
Right.
probably different, but maybe the same sorts of mechanisms.
Yeah, like if you create a new thread, right, you're not going to see another PID under your operating system.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a fork call or a spawn, you'll see an extra PID. So that's why I'm kind of questioning that. But there might be something underneath. And the other question I had was what's the difference between working in like a quant firm versus like big tech?
Oh,
Have you
there's a
worked
lot of
in like
differences.
a regular technology company or?
There's a lot of differences. I don't even know if I can finish mentioning the amount of differences that there are in like this call. So I'm gonna talk about the biggest ones. First of all, based off my discussions with people in Fang, it seems like there are so many levels of abstraction that the code you're doing, you almost need to know nothing about coding. It's a weird way to put it because I've had people that come onto my show, and they're like, okay, what version of Rust do you use? They're a Rust developer at a Fang. What version of Rust do you use? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, I just use whatever DevOps gives me, or like I just use whatever is provided at the org. They don't even bother to check. So they're writing code maybe 50% of the time. At Quant, like you know exactly what code you're writing. You know exactly like the version that you're using in the compiler, etc. And you're writing code 90% of the time. And you're not just working on small things here or there. Sometimes you're building up entire things from 0 to 100. So while an Amazon guy came in, he's like, I'm building something from like 100 to 101. But at Quant, you're building something from 0 to 100 oftentimes. Yeah, you're using third-party libraries as part of that process, but like there's new tasks and new projects that need to be built out. Whereas at Fang, everything's built to prevent you from screwing something up. Everything's already built, and you're just kind of like tweaking things around the edges, and maybe playing with some things. It's very rare to get a greenfield project at a Fang, in my opinion, based off my understanding, speaking to people. But it seems like every other day there's a new greenfield project at a quant firm. That's not to say that the greenfield project doesn't interact with other services of the organization, but it's just like a new server from the ground up, from the very first int main parentheses. You're writing this application. So it's way, way different in that regards. I also think that it's a lot harder to coast. I've seen a lot of people in Fang just coasting, and for some reason getting away with it. I don't know how people do that. It's like
It's
my
only a
boss
matter
will
of
check in with
time,
me
yeah.
every 2 weeks, and he knows exactly what I'm working on. So if there's a scope document and I tell him, I think based off the way I broke down these tasks, it'll probably take me around 2 weeks, and he comes back and checks in 2 weeks, and he's like, okay, so can you show me which one of these tasks have been in the completed phase, in the review phase, in the in progress phase? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't really do anything. He's gonna be like, okay, just get out. Like, what are you doing? You know?
Uh, I think it's only a matter of time. Like a lot of these big tech currently right now trying to trim as much fat as possible. Meta just announced a 5% layoff. I think a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
they
big
have all
tech are
these
gonna
layoffs,
follow
and
suit too.
to me, it kind of makes sense because it's just like WhatsApp was built with 40 developers, and it was sold for like $2 billion or something. Why do you need 20,000 developers? Like, what are they doing? You know, I have people call in from Amazon, and they're like, "Oh, for the first 3 months, I'm onboarding." Dude, in Quant, the first day it's onboarding, and then you're done. Onboarding in Quant is what paperwork do I need to fill in? What's everybody's names? Where does everybody sit? What does everybody do? And where's the bathroom? That's onboarding. You're done. Day 2, you start working. Yeah, you're going to get a smaller task at the beginning. They're not going to throw the whole code base at you and say go. But like, when I hear a guy that comes in and he says, at Amazon, you know, for the first 3 months, I'm shadowing another developer. What shadowing, bro? You're a senior dev. Start writing code. Like, what do you mean? Nobody's holding
Bureaucracy
should be
blow.
holding your hand. Maybe if you ask something more particular about quant versus big tech, I can give you a better answer, but that's just kind of high level based off what just came to mind.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, thanks.
For the Asian roles, do you need to like know Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, and all that, or is that just like to chill with it?
No, you don't need to know. I think it does help, though. I think it really does help. Um, yeah, it definitely helps. At the end of the day, like people that effectively, like, when you speak the same language as somebody, they just see you differently. It's like this person cares about my culture. They care about my education system. They care about my country and where I'm born enough to learn like the tongue that's used every day, right? So it definitely gives somebody a good impression of you. If there was some Chinese dude and he just starts speaking Hebrew with me, I'd be like, oh, cool. Like, how'd you learn that? You know, like, oh, you're probably very interested in Israel or whatever. Or if he starts speaking, I don't know, if I'm a Japanese or I'm a Russian dude and I see this, I don't know, random Japanese dude speaking fluent Russian, I'm like, oh, well, you must really love, you know, Russia and Russian culture, and that's pretty cool. And we can talk about our favorite Russian food and stuff like that, right? So, there's a way to bond, and it's just, I think it makes stuff easier for you as a candidate if you can have those common bonding points. And that's also why I tell people on your
Oh,
resume, write what your interests are. Write that you play basketball, and take one line on your resume, say what you're interested in, basketball or boxing or running, because maybe the other guy in front of you is a runner, and you can talk about that and whatever races you guys did together, or not together, whatever races you guys did, and it's a good point to talk to another person about.
makes sense. So it's not mandatory, but it's very, very preferred.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be speaking English at the office probably 99% of the time, but it's still, you know, it still makes a good positive impression in my opinion.
Mm.
You mind if I ask a more anecdotal question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm trying to decide whether to do a specific research, but it has applications in like totally different things from quant, like brain-computer interaction. But I would be doing like low-level systems programming, like a lot of C and maybe some C++, interacting with low-level systems, and I'm thinking that could be good for quant, but I don't know if that would on paper look good in terms of.
That's a good question because I've seen a bunch of people that, because I was at a point in my career at my previous organization where I was very close with HR, and they were saying effectively, like, here's 10 resumes. Can you please spend like 20 to 30 minutes going from taking these 10 and give me 3 that you really like, and the other 7 will be eliminated. And there's a lot of people that have non-quant related experiences, but the way that they phrase their actual experience, so they might have worked at like some healthcare device manufacturing company, but like the actual work has a lot of crossover in terms of like the low level computer architectural decisions they've needed to make. What you should do is you
Right.
should go on like a company's website, like Optiver's website, their careers page, go to the developer role and look at the what you'll do or who you are, and then use the words and language
Uh,
that they write there and interlace that into your experience. So if they're, for example,
That makes
saying we're
sense.
looking for somebody that has like understands like CPU architecture, right? So on your experience, talk about the relevant CPU points that you brought up, or that came up while you were working at that company.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a question. If you're not successful in, say, a round of sending out applications and interviews, how should you best position yourself to be in a better position in the future? So, what kind of companies? I imagine obviously working somewhere where it's C++ would be a great benefit, but aside from that, do you think it's better to be in a big company with a recognizable name or a smaller startup where you're also doing a lot of greenfield projects, which is similar to Quant in a way that would give you a lot of project experience? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts there. What I realized is that it's a lot better to be at a smaller, cracked out firm than a larger firm where you barely get any exposure. So I've had people that have called in from large FANG organizations, and I asked them like basic questions like thread versus process, and they like stumble, mumble, like they puke on themselves. I've asked this guy that's worked on Amazon for 2 years, like, have you ever done any multi-threaded code? And he said no. So that's something you learn within 3 months at a smaller firm. There's going to be a lot more demands on you, and it's going to be a place where you're forced to get cracked. You're like forced to become a better developer by virtue of working on harder and harder tasks. And also your manager is able to mold you as an individual candidate better. Because if I'm managing a team of 20, I'm not really paying as much attention into where I think you should develop in your career as if I'm managing a team of 2. When I was managing a team of two junior developers, I knew what this guy's good at and what that guy's good at and the direction that I want to push each of them and which projects in particular for these 2 candidates, for these 2 junior developers, suit them, that they're capable of doing, and slowly raising the bar and raising the bar and raising the bar and making sure that they can perform better and better and better and develop their careers in that way. I definitely, there's this real big push. Everybody's joined big tech, but like, I don't get me wrong. I've met big tech dudes that are cracked, but like it's a lot less than 15% of them. I think there's this
It's usually
misconception if you
like
join big tech, you're going to become some cracked out developer. That 90% of big tech developers are like these crazy developers. They're just really good at lead code and the interview. But I've met a lot more people at smaller firms. Let me put it this way. There's a larger proportion of people at smaller firms that are cracked than people at bigger firms that are cracked, if that makes sense. So what I would do is I would start at a smaller firm. This is what I did. I started at a smaller firm, under 200 people. And now I'm going to be working at a much larger firm because I've built the skills needed that the larger firm's looking for to say, oh, wow, like this guy has the skills we're looking for. He's the type of candidate we want to hire. And I only built these skills by virtue of like literally needing to start at the bottom and like working my way through the gutters and starting with simple projects like place logging in this application and figure out where we need to remove logging because the logs are too verbose. And then moving up to like building my own direct market access application with market data feed and working with traders and researchers to build this market making algorithm, etc. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
This might have been asked before, but how often do firms blacklist people after failing an interview or getting rejected?
So when you say blacklist, is that like if you're done forever or you're done for a period of time?
Like you're done forever.
Oh,
Like they're just like, this candidate is just not.
I've never heard of done forever, but I've heard of done for at least a year. Or until your experience changes significantly. So if they see the same company on your resume, they might be like, we interviewed this guy last year. He wasn't that great. Let's just leave him out. We have a lot more applicants to look at. But if it's like, we won't interview this guy. Oh, but wait, like he applies again 3 years later, and now I see on his resume he has 2 years at Citadel or HRT or Cumberland or Jane Street. It's like, oh well, maybe this guy really like ramped up. Let's give him another look, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
What I realize is that like the only reason companies make these policies is because there's just so much saturation in the industry. And a lot of the saturation is due to clog. When I talk about clog, I brought this up before in a live stream. It's people that are not qualified for the position, but just apply anyways. So effectively, you have a bunch of qualified candidates, but then you have like 300 times more unqualified candidates that are just clogging the system. So effectively, they're looking for a needle in a haystack to find that strong developer, because the amount of CS students has just blown up with promises of six-figure salaries and like doing yoga half the day and drinking Starbucks for 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think part of it is also like FOMO, like, oh, if this candidate looks good, he's like 9 out of 10, but then we have these other thousands candidates to do. We could probably find that 10 out of 10. You know, I think it's probably better to just stick with that 9 out of 10 candidate.
yeah, but I feel like even nowadays companies are not very comfortable with a degree of the. I think especially based off my experience, a lot of companies are just like looking for the perfect candidate, and I don't think you can find the perfect candidate in, 5 interviews, even in 10 interviews. It's like what I'm getting at is like the perfect candidate doesn't exist. Everything's a wish list, right? So you're trying to find the closest to ideal candidate that's out there. And even that is hard when there's a bunch of clog in the system, because effectively and I've seen this happen in real time, what a company will say is, well, this candidate was good, but I think we can find like a better candidate, right? And in a sense, it kind of makes sense because companies aren't in a rush. If you're not in a rush to hire, if you don't need a team tomorrow or next week or next month, you can wait. So you can say like, we're gonna like pause the process and essentially look for somebody else. But there always comes that one candidate that just like stuns the interviewers, and they're like, this guy's a strong yes. So like we want to hire him. And the goal of this channel is to help people become that strong yes. So you don't fall at silly questions like, what's the difference between a vector and a list? I asked that to a candidate. I was in an interview and I was interviewing, and the guy did okay, but I wasn't seeing anything like, he was average, an average candidate. And in my head, I'm like, I'm going to ask you this question, and if you do a good job answering it, I'll give you the yes. But if you don't, it just solidifies the no, if that makes sense. So I asked him like, okay, what's the difference between, like he did all this stuff in C++, he took a C++ course, so asking him C++ was fair. So a very basic question about data structures, which if you did any lead code, you should know the answer to. What's the difference between a list and an array? So a list and a vector. And he just like did not know at all. And he gave all these weird answers, so weird. And it's just like, okay, well, sorry, like if you don't get that, then I just can't extend this to you.
What were you looking for? Were you just like non-contiguous versus contiguous?
Yeah, non-contiguous vectors, contiguous in memory. I tried to push him. What about the memory access patterns? I asked him like, okay, so what's the memory access pattern? Why would a vector be faster? So when I asked why would a vector be faster, you need to put 2 and 2 together. Because memory is stored contiguously, and CPUs are really good at blasting through cache lines because they can prefetch instructions, and they're really good at incrementing from one address to the other with their instruction registers, +1, +1, +1, +1, then they can blaze through elements in a vector faster than they can blaze through elements in a list. Because a list has its nodes dispersed through memory, whereas a vector has it contiguously. And that contiguous memory access pattern is a lot more CPU friendly. So that's the answer that I was looking for. But he was like stumbling all over himself, and it just was not good. Another skill that I think a lot of junior devs don't have, and that's actually not asked enough in interviews, is debugging skills. So I had this candidate that he wrote some code, and I suspected he used GPT. So I asked him like, okay, well, tell me what this does. And he couldn't explain it. But I'm like, okay, maybe he's not having a good day. There's this bug that I noticed in his code here. So we went through the bug and I said, okay, it fails this test case. And he's like, oh, I see, okay. So I'm like, okay, well, why do you think it fails it? How would you debug this? And like he totally froze. And I said, you could go on, do a read documentation, you could put breakpoints. He didn't even put cout print statements. So if you can't write code and you can't debug code, there's an issue. And especially if you can't write and can't debug, and at the end of the interview you look really tired, it's like, dude, I was only here for an hour coding with you. How are you going to perform on the job when you need to code for 7 hours a day? And I told him, you can go and use online documentation. And even when he went and read the documentation and he read the answer, he still couldn't put 2 and 2 together. So it was like, okay, like this is not a strong candidate.
How did a candidate even get screened? Did they came from a good school?
Or an average school. I think University of Michigan, like decent school. University of Chicago. You know, like nothing like this no-name Dervi College online school or Revi. I don't know what they're called. But yeah, no, it was a decent school. I don't think that there's a problem that I don't think there's necessarily a problem with the job market. I do think there are excesses here and there. Like you don't need to go through 10 rounds to qualify somebody. You don't need to ask them ask them something like they'll actually use on the job. But I think there's just a problem with the candidates being cooked. And it's sad to say, but it's just that there is just so many candidates and so many candidates not really paying attention or not really caring or cheating their way through that it's not only hurting themselves, it's hurting other candidates that are actually trying because it effectively clogs the system, as I mentioned.
There's a question in chat, by the way. Yeah.
What's the question?
4 minutes ago. Oh, looks like they deleted it.
No.
I'm talking about in Discord. Someone said they couldn't use their mic, so they dropped a question. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, oh, my chat froze. Yeah, my bad. Sorry, guys.
I got a question for you. I decided to join the Patreon today. I tried to join your call on the other day, and I was being an absolute boomer with my headphones. So I'm mostly interested in QR roles. I'm a data scientist right now. I have a pretty like coasty job. So I'm getting a PhD while working full time. But I'm wondering like how important like foundational programming knowledge would be for QR roles. Like most of my sort of knowledge base is in math and statistics, and I'm like a decent programmer. Like I can get by, sort of prototyping. But when it comes to like the more advanced shit, I have a team of MLEs or data engineers that I can lean on for that kind of stuff. And in OAs that I've gotten for QR roles, it's really just like doing probability theory, and then some stochastic calculus or like basic derivatives on the fly. But wondering, like, in your experience, I guess at least adjacently, what expectations are like for a QR for foundational programming knowledge?
Every QR that I've worked with, they've coded. So they've been actually coding Python maybe 50% of the day. Because that's how you actually implement your theoretical knowledge into something that's actually makes
Oh yeah,
sense.
that's what I do. That's what I do now. Like I mean, I would say most of my days
Yeah.
programming in
Now,
Python.
you don't need to
I'm
know, like,
good at prototyping, but I'm not like, I'm not a cracked dev. So.
right, like you don't need to be cracked, essentially. You don't need to know like how your Python code interacts with the operating system. You don't need to know how networking works under the hood. You don't need to know really about concurrency. You just need to write code that works, that's tested, that's clean to a degree, and that can effectively communicate what you want to be done to the actual developer. And you should also know the language of the developer. What do I mean by that? So don't come to the developer and say like, hey, let's just do this. But it's the developer's going to look at you and say, our system doesn't work that way. We can't just like reinvent the wheel. So it's very important to come to the developer and say like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this approach? Is this something within the constraints of our current system? If not, what approaches can we take? Would it be very hard to accommodate? So you need to come up to it with like, I'm going to plan out my theory, but the implementation, the practice of that theory needs to be collaboratively decided on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's something like a soft skill I can work on. I think communicating that stuff is not my best thing. Follow up sort of question. Like I said, I'm working right now as a data scientist, also while finishing school. I have hopefully 3 years left. I'm wondering like when, then this is such a subjective question, but when to like drop my full-time role and go for an internship, because I'm self-funded in the PhD, so that's like a reasonable overhead in addition to cost of living. I have like a fairly cush job right now that I don't want to stay in. That's why I'm getting this other degree. But is 2 summers of internship like way better than say 1 summer? Like, am I fucking myself by just getting, or sorry, on YouTube, am I screwing myself by getting 1 summer of internships as opposed to 2?
To me, the purpose
return
of,
offer timeline, things like that.
to me, the purpose of the
Go ahead.
internship is to get a full-time offer. So if all you have is internships, then to me it's a little suspect. It's like, why didn't somebody give you a full-time offer? So effectively, try to aim for the internship at the place you want to work at. Maybe don't apply to them as the first company you want to apply to. You want to apply to companies you don't really want to work at the beginning, just to see effectively how receptive they are to your candidacy. Because usually companies you don't want to work at are, people aim for the stars, right? So companies you don't want to work at might not be the stars, it might be the moon. So, you know, you want to kind of see where you're at and benchmark yourself. So I would say go for that internship at the company you want to work at and try to aim for that return offer. Worst case is while you're working, you can continue to apply to other companies you're more interested in. Or between your internship, between now and your start date at that company, you can continue to see what's out there.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then last one, do you have an opinion on like so I have a family connection in a fixed income sort of space, and I'm wondering what you think that's a dead end, like my sort of, especially for research. I know for dev that's sort of maybe more transferable, but with the subject matter knowledge, do you think going into fixed income is like sort of pigeonholing yourself into that space, or is there movement maybe across markets?
There's definitely movement across markets. Obviously, you become a more specialized trader. Like if you're a nat gas trader or a fixed income trader, you have like specific knowledge as it relates to that market. Some markets are different in the sense that I think in fixed income is like pro rata. So if you're trading treasuries, like the matching algorithm is different. But if you're trading equities, it's FIFO, or there might be some combination of matching algorithms there at play. I just think equities is really hot right now. Single stock equities like S&P 500, cash indices, and stuff like that. That's all really hot right now. As you know, what are they called? Options that are expiring the same day options. Those are hot right now on the SPX. Weeklies, monthlies, those are all, yeah, zero DTE, that's right, thanks Squaw. Zero DTE options are super hot. So effectively, if you have like equities experience, everybody's going to be interested in you, but that's not to say that if you have fixed income experience, nobody will be interested in you.
Cool, thanks, man.
I think if no, we hit the hour mark. I think I'm going to open it to chat. If members or Discord guys do have questions, just wait till after I'm done answering some people in chat, and then you can guys jump in if you'd like to stay on. But if you don't want to stay on, effectively, like the call is over unless you have end of call questions. So you can hop off if you'd like to, or you can just stay on, or whatever you guys would like. I want to answer questions that members have in chat. So if there's any channel members that or patrons that I recognize in chat, you guys go ahead and ask some of your questions. If you don't know how to become a member, it's below this video. How important are certifications? Since this year they've been a recurrent subject in my uni. Also, every Python skid bullshitter Joan is talking about it. Dude, certifications don't matter. I have a friend that thinks he got some networking certification. He thinks it's cute. He thinks companies should be begging on their knees, licking his toes to have him work for them. It doesn't work that way, dude. It's not about what a piece of paper says you can do. It's what you can do. Right? So that's what I would focus on. Bolfazi, please give suggestions for software engineer who want to switch to HFT or Quant using C++. I need to know more about you, dude. I don't know enough about you to give you a suggestion. Is there a reason why some firms stick to only C++ 17? A lot of features in 20 can be like individual third-party compiled packages you can put in, like the ranges library. So they might be comfortable just sticking to 17 and importing whatever libraries they need, like format and ranges. So they might be comfortable there. But I think the firms that I want to work at, that I'm aspiring to work at, that I will be working at, they're like, oh, we're on 23 and we're totally down upgrade to 26 when it comes out. So it's a different game. What do traders at a quant firm actually do? I understand the relationship between devs and researchers, but don't see how traders fit into the picture. Traders, oftentimes, are adjusting parameters. Imagine you're sailing a ship, right? There's a lot to do on the ship. You have to wipe the deck. You have to chart the course. You have to adjust the wind and the sails, right? You have to mop the decks. I think I already mentioned that. You have to man the cannons. There's a lot to do. So traders are oftentimes internalizing information, making sure they're under risk limits, understanding what big moves can wipe them out and what direction they should steer the ship. They are focusing on adjusting parameters. They're focusing on quoting. They're focusing on market taking and market making activities, which is part of quoting. They're doing a lot. They have 8 monitors for a reason. They're doing a lot. I can't get into like very, very specifics, but each one of them effectively runs a strategy in a portfolio with their desk mates. So you might have like a gold desk, but you might have 3 different portfolios, each have different option products for different expiries, but each portfolio might be like a given strategy. Like all options in this portfolio are for this strategy, all options in that portfolio are for that strategy. And they're managing the risk on the strategy on the portfolio level. Side projects are only relevant if you are a junior dev and you're applying for a junior role, or you're like a school student, you're applying for a junior role. They're more relevant if you're as a senior or mid-level, if it's like a cool open source project. You have 6 years experience of Android systems engineering performance. I worked with C++ in these years and have good knowledge of OS. What should I do to get an offer from finance? You really need to know the fundamentals, so go on learncpp.com. To figure out what you don't know, go on, get to the book CPP Daily Interview. I talked about it in a video, and go through that book and see what do I know, what do I not know. And that'll really help you figure out what you need to change or what you need to brush up on in C++. And then go through the 5 books that I mentioned in my previous videos, the 5 books on operating systems, networking, etc. I detailed the chapters as well that are going to be relevant for you, so brush up on that as well. Guys, I'm answering the members' questions first, so that's just part of the members' benefit. So if they don't have any questions, I'll go to regular chat. But for now, I'm just answering members' questions. I saw you posted some interview resource on Patron for dev. Do you have something similar for QR? I think there's something called Kaggle that'll help you with the machine learning side of Python. But even then, like, a lot of Quant is not machine learning. There's so much not machine learning stuff to do that you'd be surprised. Machine learning is almost like a money pit in Quant. You throw money at developers that are cracked and that have PhDs, and you might get a return or you might not. But it's usually for larger firms that have that sort of resources and that sort of money to spend. So for QR, it's a lot of it's going to be your fundamentals. There's there's big strides towards stuff like principal component analysis. Look into that. There's stat arbitrage that's big in almost any firm. Look into stuff like that. Yeah, Peter said, I've done lots of QR OAs. Just take Prob 101 from Harvard and on EDX and you'll be able to get through it. Yeah, Bayesian statistics is big. Distributions. Thanks. About side projects, I'm working on L4 load balancing using URing and a market data handler using fixed handles, event less than 100 micros with C++. Are they okay? Don't really focus on like a speed. Focus on how clean your code is. And focus on what you can learn from the experience. That's what's going to be important. That's what, when they're interviewing you, dude, when they're interviewing you, Abasi, what they're going to ask you is like, what did you do? What could you have done better? What did you do really well? What sort of challenges did you have? What would you do if you had to do it all over again? You see what I'm saying? Is Hong Kong good for like full stack software engineering jobs? I'm not sure that's really what Hong Kong's about. Hong Kong's a financial center. It's Asia's financial center. So that's no problem, Vasi. That's what it's known for. Hong Kong isn't really known for being a CS or tech hub, which I think why it's more hungry for foreign developers. So maybe, but like, is that the best market to look for that in particular? Front end or full stack in a software engineering in a financial city? Maybe not. I made I made a bunch of videos on day trading, so I'm not going to go over that again. But I'm anti-day trading. Somebody asked about if the data on levels for Hong Kong salaries are accurate. I don't know what the salaries there look like. Like, give me an example firm, I'll search it up, and I can tell you whether it makes sense to me. Jack, I made my most recent videos about 3 top resources for C++ prep. Anybody in Discord voice chat have any other questions? CJ, you talked about implementing smart pointers, vector from scratch. What else would you know how to write from zero? single producer, single consumer, thread safe queue. Probably something like lock-free version of that too. Mutex might be important. So figure out how to write a mutex. One that probably spins and then also sleeps or yields. Semaphore. All the primitives. Think of all the primitives. Weak pointer, unique pointer. Where do I look for a job in Hong Kong? LinkedIn? No, I had the recruiter reach out. He was a finance recruiter. He knew everybody. So why did you decide to look for a new job, especially during current times of uncertainty? There's a couple of different reasons. One of them was I wanted a company that was more tech forward. I wanted a company that was more willing to take on new technologies. I also felt like I wasn't learning as much as my previous role, only because, well, for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons being that it was a smaller firm, so my scope of the industry was limited to the amount of resources that the firm had in the markets it was playing in. Whereas I'm going to a larger firm, which is going to give me a much wider view of the space, because there's much more teams, much more assets, multinational offices, so you're going to get a bigger picture of the world of quant trading. So yeah, it was a time for me for just professional career growth. There was nothing. I'm not going to talk bad about the place I previously worked at, because at the end of the day, like, everybody looked out for me, everybody was nice to me. Everybody was like cordial and like good people. It was just I saw better opportunities elsewhere. Is it possible to get a role as a QD without a degree, or are you thrown out the window if you don't have a degree, even if you're cracked? I was self-taught and I didn't have a relevant degree. I had a degree, I just didn't have a relevant degree. So I'm just like, will they give you an online assessment if you don't have a degree? Probably not, unfortunately. Because at the end of the day, dude, there's enough people that are cracked that have a degree for them to go for. There's no shortage of cracked people with degrees, so why would they risk a cracked person without a degree? How would they even know you're cracked, if that makes sense? Guys, before I get my food in the next 20 minutes, if we have 5 new members, I will gift 5 subscriptions. I will gift 5 memberships. So if somebody gifts 5 memberships, I'll match that. Or if 5 new people join, I will gift 5 memberships to random people in chat. How do you multitask with all your workload and learning without exhausting and maintaining your discipline and focus? You give a few tips with your approach of learning dense topics for hours. Yeah, a lot of it is going to be crafted from you as a kid in terms of like the education system you worked under and how likely you are to give up or quit. I think there was a study where they did like Japan versus America. The American kids, within 2 minutes, they like ran to their iPads. And the kids in Japan, even though they gave them the same question and it was like a grade 10 question and they were first graders, the kids in Japan like spent like 3 hours on it before they gave up. So there's that component. So there's the cultural component. There's also the component of just like being able to grind and also being able to change things up and approaches up. So I might learn, on pluralsight.com for an hour, but then I might open a book for another hour. And then I might watch a tutorial for another hour. So I'm constantly switching things up, so I never feel like I am like hard-coded to one thing. So I don't get like bored or dazed from just staring at a computer for so long. Thank you, Aditya, for becoming a junior dev. 4 more joiners and I'm going to gift 5 subs. Yeah, guys, I need more likes on the stream. Why are there like 12 likes? And they're all like my family members and there's like 1,000 people watching. Not 1,000, but you get it. Is Hong Kong more money, especially after taxes? And it's like, yeah, Hong Kong will be a lot more money. Especially if I drop my green card. How did you stand out to your HK recruiter? I feel like most recruiters for HK would contact only if they have some indication that you would be willing to move, as most engineers wouldn't. Yeah, they made it very clear at the beginning, like, you know, this is a role in Hong Kong. Are you interested in moving to Hong Kong? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Let's see what's out there. You know, I never, what I learned that really helped me throughout life is to never say no. Like if somebody says, "Can I kill you?" Say no, but try to never say no otherwise. Always, good things only come from saying yes. Mutually beneficial things only come from saying yes. They don't come from saying no. So say yes. Worst case, you say, "Well, I tried. It's not for me." Before becoming self-taught, did you have passion for tech at all? I honestly don't have much passion for tech, but I've had some good internship experience really doing it for the financial freedom. I did not. I hated tech. And I think I hated tech because when I was in high school, I had these really cracked people around me, and they were writing Python and mining Bitcoin in like grade 7. And I was like, this is all so complicated. How am I ever going to figure this out? And they were all writing all these scripts and building calculators, and I'm like, okay, that's like too hard. But everything has a time and a place. And I found my passion for development while at my first place of employment at BitMEX. So everything has a time and a place, man. I didn't like it initially, but then it grew on me a lot. Thoughts on comp tech and comp engineering? I'd definitely go for comp engineering over comp sci. Comp engineering is going to get you more cracked because it's more hardcore. Sin. So that's the thing. Sin super chatted, which is why I answered his question. But if Sin became a member, I would have been answering his questions for the next 20 minutes. And it's only $1 more. So I think it's a worthwhile deal. Hey CJ, bad internet. Do you think you can answer my question in Discord chat? Where's your question? Which channel is your question in? I'll answer it when I see it. I'm on for the next 20 minutes, so if we get, or until I get my food, which is in delivery. So if we get 3 more? No, I think it's 4 more members, I'll gift memberships. Gospel text chat. Oh. Hey CJ, traveling right now, so can't use my mic. What's your advice on moving from C++ dev roles to Quant dev roles? I've read the OS, multithreading books. C++ dev roles are Quant dev roles. Once you're working in, say, market data or risk tech, is it easy to move to Quant dev? I would say definitely. Even in Quant dev, there's different divisions. There's infra, there's market data, there's risk, there's order entry, there's like execution, which is order entry effectively. Any advice on how to get senior roles fast? Usually there's a ladder. For example, you know, first year you're a junior. Within 1 year to 1 year 3 you're mid-level, or year 4. After year 4 you should probably be closer to senior, right? So there's a hierarchy there. I don't accept Discord DMs if you're just a regular preacher member. It would just be way too much. But if you're a cardinal member or a bishop member, you can DM me. So yeah, if you try to add me after becoming a patron, unless you're one of those higher tiers, I just don't add. It would just be too much. That's why I need to filter out with tiers. Thank you, Ria, for becoming a member. 3 more members, and I'm going to gift 5 memberships. Does job hopping kind of gets you to senior roles? At the same time, like, just be aggressive about your career trajectory. Say, I would like to become a senior. This is what I did. I said, I would like to see myself as a senior by May, for example. Do you see me becoming a senior by then? And if not, what would I need to do to get there? Or how do you recommend I structure the timeline if that is too early? Right? You should have a monthly meeting with your manager, and you should be asking these questions if that's your objective. So there was a guy that sat beside me. He was, I would say, double as cracked as me, if not more. It felt like every time he coded, an alien beamed information into his head because he knew how to design it within like an hour. which would probably take me like 5 hours. He was just that next level. He was like a 5 out of 5 dev. But he got paid less than me. Why? Because he didn't ask for more. He wasn't aggressive. Do you think cloud is worth learning? Most of the LAC is like template code. Feel ChatGPT does it so quick. Should it be aiming to be cloud architect consultant? I know nothing about cloud, dude. Nothing. Because Quant is all bare metal. 90%, 99% of it is bare metal. You have the servers literally in the office. There's a massive server room, and that's where all your code is deployed and running. Isn't that so cool? You deploy the code, and you're like, I'm going to go for coffee. And you walk past the server room, you're like, yeah, that's where my code is running right now. Am I now in Thailand? No, I'm not in Thailand right now. I'll be in Thailand January 25th. Somebody asked, wow, aggressive. How aggressive should you be on hunting raises? I only become aggressive if I know that I'm getting shortchanged. Because nobody's going to advocate for you other than you. So if you know you can get a better salary at another company, and I'm not saying better by 5-10%, I'm saying better by 30%, then be aggressive. Either aggressive internally, or if they can't match it, see what somebody else is willing to pay you. Guys, I prioritize members' questions, so if you'd like to ask, become a member. 3 more memberships, and I think if I can get them in the next 10 minutes, I will gift 5 memberships. Anybody in Discord Discord voice have any questions? Would you think it'd be possible to have a lateral shift across countries, like from India for a dev role, or have a better chance getting a master's PhD? You mean lateral within an organization or outside of an organization? I mean, there's plenty of Indians that are visa holders that come to the US. I think a lot of them, what they do is they get a master's here, and then based off of their master's degree, I think there's also like a master's student visa so that they stay here for 2 years or something. I think that they do that as well. I don't know the exact strategy there. What's my view on Guru of the Week to prepare for C++? I don't know what that means, Guru of the Week. Is it worth trying to transfer to a better school for CS if trying to break into Quant, or does it not really matter if I get cracked enough? I think if you get cracked enough, dude, as long as it's not like DeVry online college, nobody cares, other than like very elitist firms. That's just because their candidate pool is so broad that like they can afford to only hire the guy that's at Yale or MIT. At the end of the day, dude, there are so many people that I've interviewed from FANG and Big Tech, and you'd think that these guys are cracked out of their mind, 300K salaries or 300K, 400K TC, and it's just like, what happens when you add 2 booleans? They don't know. Or what's the difference between a static method and an instance method? They don't know. It just goes crazy. How did I get my US visa? I don't even remember. I was on some visa that I got. The company sponsored me. It was not like H-1B. It was like a TN visa. I was very lucky. I had like a very easy border guard in the sense that he reviewed the work, saw that I was sponsored, didn't ask too many like crazy questions, tried to like probe like, what do you want? Where are you coming from? Where do you want to go? Well, he didn't know. He was having a good day that day. I don't know what you mean, Aditya, by cross company kind of thing. It's not become a member to ask a question, Harvey. It's members get priority. So if members don't have questions, I'll then come to your question or your silly comment. Where did you live before the US? I lived in Hong Kong before the US. So I'm actually going back to Hong Kong. It's not going to be new to me. I'm going to be curious to see how things changed. What do you wish you could go back and do, learn coding tech from the level you are now? Did you start with Python and learn basic networking? No, if I could do something differently, it would be instead of learning C#, learn Python really well. But the thing is, I didn't really use any Python at work, maybe like 1% of the code, so I probably would have forgotten it anyways. Would you guys be interested in like a mock interview video where I just sit there and ask you questions? And like, it's almost like I'm talking to you like this. We're in a room and I'm just asking you questions and I pause the video. And like, I just pause. And while you're like answering and I'm like staring at you like this. And I'm like pressing you like a real interview, like, you better get the answer right. You better not fumble this. I'm going to look at you and be like, the answer to this question will determine whether or not you get the 500K offer. Don't fumble the bag. No, in Hong Kong, I was working at a company called BitMEX. It was a cryptocurrency derivatives exchange. I'm actually the nicest interviewer. I've had people that I've interviewed, and they're like, at the end of the interview, they're like, hey, do you have a YouTube channel? I'm like, yeah. By the way, if you ever see me interviewing you, don't say that. I just don't think it's professional. You're not going to lose points or anything like that. I'm not going to bring it up to anybody that you ask me that question. I just don't think it's professional to do that. I'm actually being on YouTube kind of scares me too, because like, let's say I interview somewhere and the interviewer recognizes me. He's gonna be like, oh, it's Coding Jesus. Let's ask him to lead code impossible. You know what I mean? It's just like, shit. Guys, I'm not that good at lead code. When I was practicing, I was doing easies and mediums. I think I touched 2 hards from the Neat Code 150. I'm not good at like dynamic crazy 2D dynamic programming. I don't really do that much. So I was actually applying for. There's a degree of truth when people say like I kind of got lucky as well, because when I was applying in 2019, nobody really knew what Quant was, and it was in an era where people can get hired for having a pulse, at least in big tech, not maybe in a smaller company where I was going for, but I would say that the candidate pool was a lot less competitive. That doesn't mean that I didn't like work my ass off and do my best to become cracked. It just means I wasn't going against super cracked people that are now applying, figuring out like, oh, Quant's a thing. I didn't even know that. Right? So I wouldn't say finance degree and self-taught is the route. I would say that it is a route that is less competitive nowadays than it was before. But yeah. Joined in late. Did you talk about your interview experience in this live? Not really. I think I did a video on it. The company I'm going to be working at, I did 5 rounds. Really good, really clean. I think I did an OA. I did a 2-hour technical, which was 3 questions, 2 lead code, 1 non-lead code. Then I did a resume interview with the tech lead. And then I did a round with a partner, and then a round with my prospective team lead, who was a quantitative researcher. And I thought the rounds were perfect. The communication was amazing. HR was on top of things. And then you have other companies where it's just like, we want like 8 rounds with you. And it's just like, oh, you know, like, it's just tiring and exhausting.
Or most of the rounds like technical.
For which one? Which U.S. companies and
for the HK one.
No, so only 2 of them were. Well, excluding the online assessment, I would consider that 1 round. So the first, effectively, it was like online assessment, 1 coding technical, 1 non-coding technical. I already revealed my junior resume. I revealed my resume on a previous live stream, my current resume, well, the one that I used to apply to the firm that I'm going to be working at. So hopefully you caught it. But where's the resume you applied to junior with, though? Oh, I have a video on it, dude. I have an old video. If you guys want to see my previous resume, you have to be a member because it's in the live stream, which is available to members only. It's in a VOD. If we get 3 more members, I don't think we can do it. If we get 3 more members before I get my food, which comes in 10 minutes, to keep pushing the time back, I will gift 5 memberships. If anybody's generous enough to gift 3 memberships, then that counts too. Junior resume was not in the last call. That was senior resume. My mom texted me that my food's here, guys, so I'm gonna end this here. Thank you guys for joining. If you guys would like to be part of the next bi-monthly as in 2 times a month, not every 2 months, bi-monthly call, become a patron. You get access to the Discord, and yeah, we do this a lot and often. And thank you for joining. I will see you guys later. Peace.
Thanks, CJ. Bon appetit.
Yep, see you guys.